So today I want to show you the new commercial collection from CV Funk, the Modulations collection that includes a complex oscillator, SYZYGY, a sequencer based on the arrange sequencer, but in this case extra large, a collection of envelopes with envelope city, and the modulation source based on Wonk. Let's start with SYZYGY, which is a complex oscillator based on the Aorus oscillator, also from CV Funk. So basically we have two oscillators that interact with one another. Right, we have here a volume control. Right, we can detune them separately, so maybe the second one I will take an octave down, just enter -1. Right, we can spread them in the stereo field. Right, and you can see this nicely here also on the display. Right, we can add feedback, right, to each of them. Of course, also modulate things. So in this case, I will use really the Super Wonk. Again, from the same commercial collection. We will look at it more in depth later on, but basically what we have here is 16 LFOs, right? So I can modulate the feedback of both oscillators. Right, maybe take the rate a bit down. Again, we will look at Super Wonk later on. Right, we can also modulate the phase, which is also quite fun, again of both oscillators separately. We have also ring modulation and amplitude modulation with the mix control. Right, so I can add ring modulation or amplitude. Right, something like this maybe. We even have wave folding. And of course also this I will modulate. Right, we can also modulate the symmetry, which will affect the wave folding. Of course this is also polyphonic. Let me take the volume down for a second. I have here Harmony 2 from Squintronics. This will generate a 4-note chord or a chord progression. Right, so I will just send this to the volt per octave input of both oscillators. You see we have 4 channels of polyphony, and now SYZYGY is also polyphonic. Right, so we have chords. Right, with all the movement and everything. Now we also have here individual outputs of for each of the oscillators. Right, so here I have another example. I have here an arpeggiator arpeggiating this chord progression, and instead of using the main output, I'm using the individual outputs, and I have here for each output, for each oscillator, I have its own bandpass filter and a delay, right? So we get lots and lots of movement. We also have another interesting feature, the Cross FM or XFM. Right here I have a sort of a bass. Let me solo this for a second. Right, just triggering it with a trigger sequencer. I'm using the volume here as a VCA. Right, and now we have here the XFM. Right, so both oscillators will FM one another. And we have in the right-click menu a few options. So we have the FM range. In this case, I will go with -10. We have FM mode, exponential or linear. I will go with exponential. And we have also the XFM mode, if it's oscillator 1, oscillator 2, or both. Let's see what happens when I change this to both. Right, you get really interesting sounds. I will bring this back to oscillator 1. Right, and now I can use, for example, an envelope to control this, to add a punch a bit to the sound. Right, something like this. And it's also great for percussion. So here again, I will solo this voice here. I have it sequenced by the Euclidean sequencer from Funk Modulation. Right, and what I have here, I have, as you can see, cross FM, I have them detune just to create something percussive, and there is also noise, built-in noise that you can mix in, either all the way down, just the oscillators. Right, so you can create something nice and percussive, and then add noise to it, either white or pink. Right, and again create percussion. The next module I want to show you is the Arrange XL, which is based on the Arrange sequencer. It's a sequencer where you can record values and even probability. Here again I have SYZYGY. Right, and I can use the first sequence to sequence the pitch, let's say, of the first oscillator. So if we go to the volt per octave input, now we have different modes here. I'm going to switch this to notes mode. You can see it says C4, and then activate recording. And now I can go step by step and change the notes. We have in this case 16 steps. So let's say I will have a few steps of C4. I just go forward here and then change this, let's say, to G. Then a few notes of G, then it will go down to F, right, D sharp or E flat, and then let's go to B flat here, right, something like this. And now we have this more or less recorded. If I activate edit and I can scan through, we can hear this. Right, if I don't have edit on, it will just overwrite what was already there. So make sure to activate edit, and now I can also drive this with the clock forward or backwards. Right, and we have this sequence. Now we can record also movements or record modulation. I have this SYZYGY going through a filter, so I can close it, then use another row to modulate the filter. Right, and now I just have to move this knob. Now it's in a volts mode, right? So I can just use this knob, and it will record the steps. Right, let's also do this for the wave folding. Right, maybe also for the noise level. Right, again I have recording and edit on, so I can just move the knobs and it will record the changes. Now I have the second oscillator here. As you can see, we just sequenced the first oscillator because the second oscillator I have here is synced to the first one. You see it's sync locked. Right, so I can change the frequency of the second one and get more variation in timbre. So I'm going to sequence or record modulation for this as well. Right, I will add some delay to this. I have here the tree delay or tri delay, also CV Funk. Right, now as I mentioned before, we can also record probability. So I'm going to take the level down here for a second, and I have here an attack decay envelope that I'm going to use to open the VCA or to bring this voice in through the level input. Right, and now use another sequence to trigger the envelope, and again we have different modes. So the third mode is probability. You can see by default it's 50%, but I can change this per step. Again, just record some movements here. Right, and now each step has different probability to actually trigger this voice. Right, and again we have 16 channels. We can also record external sequences. So here I have Aorus. Right, maybe I'll let some feedback here. Right, and I have here a random source with a Turing machine-like module. This is the random loops from SYZYGY, so I can also lock the sequence. So I will use the first channel here for pitch. This will go, in this case, through a quantizer, because again, I want to record random sequences, right? And then use the random loops here in the input, right? Then activate recording and edit. In this case, let's go with a sequence of 64 steps, so we have some variation. Now I can lock it, release it, lock it, release it, right? Disconnect it, and we have this sequence recorded. Right, so I just recorded a random sequence, sometimes locked, sometimes random. And we have a 64-step sequence. I can also record feedback modulation, right, again with a random sequence, sometimes with modulation, sometimes without. Right, something like this. I have this going through Tatami, which is a wave folder also from CV-Funk, which with wave folding for the left and the right channel separately. So I'm going to record also modulation there, sometimes for the left, for the right. Right, and again I have edit on, so I'm not overwriting what's already there. If now I turn off edit, everything will just be overwritten, so make sure to have edit on. Right, but now we have the sequences recorded, and we can also record smooth signals and experiment a bit with audio rate recording. Right, here I have another chord with another SYZYGY, right, with harmony 2, generating the chord. Right, and now I have here also 7 smooth random signals coming from the Armod 7 from SYZYGY connected to the 7 first inputs here on Arrange XL. Right, so first of all, what we can do to get higher resolution, in the right-click menu, I can change the maximum sequencer length to 2048, right, and then go all the way up. So now we have 2048 steps to record on, right, so we have a higher resolution. Activate recording. Again, in the right-click menu, we have stop record at end. So when the 2048 steps end, it will stop the recording. And now we can drive the arrange at higher rates, which will be basically the sampling rate. So what I have here, I have a VCO, right, with quite a high frequency, and this will drive the Arrange XL, and now it records the random signals to those steps with a resolution of 2048 steps, and when it reaches the end, it stops the recording. Right, and now I play this back at the rate of the VCO, right? So I can make this quicker. Right, or slower, I can even slow it down. So imagine you can record something at higher speeds and then slow it down. And again, the SYZYGY is now playing polyphonically a 7-note chord, so we have 7, or in this case 6 channels of polyphony. Right, so I can change the Arrange XL also to polyphony here in the right-click menu, and we have modulation per voice. Right, so now we have also 6 channels of polyphony here. Let's take a look now at Super Wonk, which is based on Wonk. As we've seen before, we have 16 LFOs, right? 8 here and 8 more here. You can see their movement here on the display. I have a few of them modulating again SYZYGY, spread, feedback, and so on. It has a short sequence setup. Right, so there is some modulation here. Of course, I can change the rate. I can also sync this with the clock. Right, and then the rate control becomes a multiplier and divider. We can also change the relationships with the node. Right, if I move the node a bit, you see now they move differently. If I take it, for example, all the way up, you see we get this movement. So like this, you can get also different phase relationships. And the nice feature here is that we can introduce feedback phase modulation with the Wonk control, right? I can choose which of the LFOs will feed back and then add feedback here. Right, so now we get something a bit more chaotic and interesting. We have also the align feature, which is also quite fun. I have here a chord progression, again with Harmony 2 and another SYZYGY. Let me solo this for a second. Right, so first of all, we can set up Super Wonk to be polyphonic, either by using the P output here, the polyphonic output, where we will get all 16 channels, or we can set it also in groups. So since I have here 4-note chords, you can see I have 4 channels of polyphony. I can set it in the right-click menu to 4 channels. Right, and now from output 1, we will get 1 to 4. Right, so I can use output 1 to modulate, for example, the spread here. Then output 5 will be 5 to 8, right, in groups of 4. And then we have 9 to 12, and then we have 13 to 16, right? So we have 4 groups of 4 channels of polyphony, 4 polyphonic modulation sources. Right, and now here with the align, we can bring back the LFOs into phase either by clicking and holding this button. Right, and then when I let go, it goes back to chaos, or we can use also a gate input. And by the way, the right-click menu, you can choose how long this will take. You see align fade time. I can make this shorter. Right, or I can make this quite long. Slowly it will align. Right, I'm going to bring this back into to 2 seconds and then use a clock division that I have here. Right, just to have some movement. I have here another example. In this case, I'm using Super Wonk in unipolar mode, so 0 to 10. And you can see I have again polyphony of 3 channels. So I'm using 3 channels for pitch and then 3 more groups, right? Or also for modulation. In this case, it's modulating Aus. The last module in this collection is envelope city, which is similar to envelope array, and it gives you 16 envelopes and the ability to control the phase and curves between the first and last envelopes. Here I have a 16-note chord with SYZYGY, basically just 16 different notes. I'm using polyphonic offset. Right, and also here on envelope city we have polyphony. I can use, in this case, since I have 16 channels, I can use the last output here, which will give me all 16 envelopes in one polyphonic cable. If I trigger now the first envelope, right, all of them will trigger. And then I can use the width of the first and the width of the last and change the curves, and there they will interpolate, and we get something like this. Right, and of course we can change this. Right, we can make this longer and this shorter. Right, so we get the 16 envelopes. What I will do in this case, I'm going to trigger this with a clock multiplication of 4. Now, of course, this is way too fast. But first of all, we have probability per envelope in the right-click menu. Right, we have all the different channels, 1 to 8, 9 to 16, or all channels probability. I will take it down to about 80 or 85. Right, so already we have probability. And what I will also do, I will disable the retrigger, so each envelope will finish its cycle before it retriggers. Right, and then we get something a bit more random. What I will do also is trigger the second part here, the 9 to 16. So we have 8 independent with 83% probability and another 8 independent with 83% probability. Right, and I can change them a bit. Right, so they bring in and out the different notes within the 16 channels of polyphony. Now we also have for each envelope the end of function gate output, so whenever the envelope ends, it will output a gate. I have here another example, and you can see I'm cascading the outputs. So output 1 will trigger envelope 2, output 2 will trigger envelope 3, and so on and so forth. Right, so they will cascade. This will eventually bring in Aorus that I have here. And all I have to do is connect the last output here back to the first. Right, and now this will endlessly loop. And of course I can modulate things to add more movements. I have here again Super Wonk that I can use to modulate the envelopes. Right, and they will just continue looping. This just needs a nice bass drone that I have here in another SYZYGY Super Wonk modulating things, including a wave folder also from CV Funk. And that was it. I hope I could show you the potential of this collection. I hope you will get it and experiment with it. Thank you for watching. Cheers.